I'm Mahesh Narayanan, I'm the Program Director for Series A, and welcome to Newchip's Online Demo Week. You're about to watch a fireside chat between myself and one of our mentors, Freeman, and we'll be talking about mentorship, validating your product and your company, and also making sure you raise money from the right investors. Please connect with me on LinkedIn as well as Twitter, and if you're a Series A company looking to raise money, let's talk. Thank you so much for tuning in to Newchip's Online Demo Week, and let's get started. All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mahesh Narayanan. I'm the Program Director for Series A at Newchip. And today we have Mr. Chris Freeman, who's the VP of Entrepreneurial and Growth at Colliers International. Hello, Chris. Welcome to our first Fireside Chat.
That's very exciting. I feel a pleasure to be your first guinea pig, Mahesh.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks for joining. And thanks for all the companies in the Series A that have joined. So Chris, I'd love to get an introduction for yourself, many things you've done, and then we'll go into our discussion. So please take this time to introduce yourself.
Man, I would love to be clever right now, but I don't think it's possible. So I've done a couple things in my past. I had a career that spanned about 8 or 9 years in advertising. The latest agency was working for DDB, launched brands like Husky with Home Depot. I worked with toilet seats as well. That was my first account. And all my friends asking if I worked at McDonald's and Budweiser, my answer would be yes. When in reality, I was working on toilet seats for Bemis Manufacturing out of Wisconsin, who now actually has a pretty big family office that syndicates investment into tech. So weird how circuitous life goes, right? So I worked within advertising on United Airlines, launched State Farm into banking after Dodd-Frank changed, and mutual funds and credit card. Like a good neighbor, we charge you 25%. Had the great pleasure of working on a lot of brands, a lot of CPG stuff, some service, financial products, medical, and everything in between. Got frisky, started directing movies and producing, thought I was going to be Scorsese, started competing, which led me to take a huge first pivot in my life and jumped into help a friend out with their little crappy bar in Chicago where they were losing $13,000 a month. And that led me to start an $80 million company out of Chicago called Four Corners Tavern Group. My equity was this much. My partners had this much because I didn't know anything about how to arrange equity at this point. And when you hear equity as a 28-year-old, you're like, yeah, sounds great. Dumb. Made a little bit of money, parlayed that to start another company called Element. We got into 9 states. I partnered up with somebody who I use as a really good fodder for who not to partner with and how to construct or not construct partnerships. I guaranteed the majority of the company. We grew to about 45 million. We were in 9 states with about 750 employees. And by the end of it, we were building hotels, developing, putting the F&B concepts into hotels, collaborating with other hotels, everything from design to construction and I have a couple different passions. Design and construction is one of them. And then we also got into cold pressed juice and HPP and manufacturing soups and ingredients and curing meats in a USDA facility in Baton Rouge for our own concepts within Levy, fast casual, quick serve. We had, what else? We had mezcalerias, diners, taverns, sports bars, fine dining. We were like an unmanned fire hose turned on full blast. The advice I give to a lot of mentees is, focus is a good F word. And we had a $45 million company, and in almost every facet of F&B, for vertical integration, supply chain, negotiating handshakes with the Amish farmers from Southern Illinois so we could use their tomatoes to flash freeze them and make spaghetti sauces for some of our concepts that were more Italian in nature. So it was a real kind of cool pioneers get arrows, settlers get homes type thing. So we came up with a lot of really cool stuff that other people followed. And, it was wild. It was a good ride. So anyway, acrimony is parting with my partner. I sent him back and he disappeared. I pivoted for the 3rd time in my life and went into an area that I had nothing but vitriol and disdain for, which was commercial real estate, because I'd always been the buyer before. Now I'm brokering for office space and whatnot. And I figured I could innovate. Part of that was innovating using tech and my having founded over 60 companies as the foil or as the unique lens. So I got into 1871, started mentoring. I became an EIR there out of Chicago, and we touch a lot of stuff all around the world. And there are accelerators with Bosch and GFS and a bunch of fun stuff. which then I got approached by Newchip and about 4 other accelerators that I'm still currently working with. That takes me all over the world. And it's kind of fun in almost every category. I have kind of a unique ability to be strategic and see forest through the trees at times. Also I'm an operator at heart. So really getting in there and figuring out what's wrong and figuring out a solution to it. And what I don't know, especially as a mentor, Mahesh knows this, I'll go find it. So, I'll go meet the CIO of Aon if I'm meeting with an insurtech startup because they're just having a strategic problem or problem with their tech. And my ability to access or weevil into situations to say, hey, would you help my guy out or girl? That's fun. So I also am part of a small venture fund startup that was birthed out of my involvement at 1871 called Coyote. I've kind of ratcheted that down a little bit because one of our partners is sick. What else do I do? I'm also an operating partner with Orchid Black. Orchid Black, we help people exit. Simply stated, $5 to $50 million, small to mid cap. 20 operating partners. We take 25 projects a year. We're a great skipping stone on the way to private equity. And I think I'm the only of 20 operating partners that needs to work. Everyone else just doesn't want to play golf for 7 days. And it's a pretty incredible group of people. So it's fun. I learn a lot through them. I make good coffee. So pleasure to be here. Thanks, guys, for attending.
Awesome, Chris. So yeah, you covered a lot there. So if people missed it, Chris is a mentor at Newchip as well. So you have him as a great resource here, and we certainly encourage you to reach out to him later on. So Chris, let's jump into the real topic that we want to talk about, which is my company VC fundable, right, or VC investable? So one of the main things that I want to talk about are what are the points that investors are looking for in companies so that they can actually go ahead and invest in them, right? And so I've kind of broken down into a couple main topics. I think the main part that a lot of companies themselves are interested in is the company and the product, right? But oftentimes what the VCs want to hear is, are you as a group clear on what you have, where you're going, and where you want to be, right? So what are some things that make a company investable for a VC, do you think?
I mean, it's funny. I bet everybody on the call could, or Zoom or whatever, would agree with this. There are different VCs, different sizes, all have different theses, right? Or theses or whatever the word is. And there's certain things that just unify companies that have a pretty good, if not excellent, trajectory. And, in our opinion, and through my conversations with people far smarter than me in venture, who I've learned a lot from, you obviously have your leadership team and within that, the dynamics within that leadership team, how volatile or combustive could that be? How in it to win it and what's their skin in the game type thing. And just personality wise, have they shed that initial founder hubris that I had? When I started my first company, I could walk on water, and I realized now that I was, probably brushed up against being a douche at points. But you kind of shed that as you begin to listen to people when they tell you things and they want to help you. You should take help. So the leadership team is obviously a big part of it. How they envision their company not only existing and starting up, but continuing. So do they have an exit strategy out of the gate? And even before that, and this is something I run into a lot as a mentor with any one of a number of accelerators, as EI or otherwise, there's a lot of common sense that sometimes it takes somebody else to tell you what you're about to step in. And you even with Newchip and the accelerators themselves, sometimes you need other people to tell you, like, hey, watch out, there's a big pile of crap in front of you, don't step in that. And part of that is using common sense, getting the right mentors on board, knowing when and when not to listen to them. That's a big one, because I have a lens that's all marred with tobacco, smoke from cigars and experience of my life. And it's a lens I look through, it's mine. And I give opinions through that lens, and it's up to the mentee or the company to accept or refute that and have a good spirited conversation. So there has to be some chemistry there, right? But moreover, it's foundational revenue. So really, as soon as a lot of founders, and we're talking to Series A people right now, so I think you guys are probably past this, but as soon as you experience some level of success, and I had this happen as well. You heard it with my last company. Everybody wanted us. We were talking to Momofuku. It was, oh my God, this is going to be amazing. Everything is an opportunity. Like literally, we were a hammer and everything was a nail. So it really is being able to focus and create foundational revenue to then build, I always use the bullseye or whatever, or the pyramid, but you focus on that bullseye and you build that foundational revenue that can actually contribute to your next level and the other opportunity that might have to wait, or you might have to pass on it. And it's agonizing, but you're building, your principal revenue stream. And sometimes that principal revenue stream becomes secondary to I just had this happen, to an ancillary product. And it turned out the ancillary product that was added to every one of the purchases that people made became their primary product. And the main product became the peripheral or the ancillary. So it really is just kind of listening to people. So, the team is a big part of that. The product, obviously there has to be traction, right? And depending on the geocentricity of where the product is intended to be sold or what target it's meant to be sold within. And even when fundraising, I know we'll talk about this, I've just started waving my flag for my yesteryear quantitative and qualitatively with DDB and Omnicom of research. And validation doesn't necessarily always have to be, especially if you're in like the MVP stage or you're going, proof of concept and you're starting to get traction. Research can validate, the right kind of research can validate the founder for being grounded. And I'm smart and we have traction. We've developed this cool thing, but look at the research and it's statistically significant. And knowing the difference between qualitative and quantitative so that you can use both to your benefit when presenting to fundraise, to VC, that's huge. And it's something I'm illuminating I have 13 mentees right now, maybe more. And it's a lot, but I enjoy it. I love it. And every one of them had no idea about this. And I brought in an agency friend of mine yesterday with a conversation with Alex Hajazi from Newchip, and to talk about pivoting his brand and bifurcating it and using research to validate his decisions before he does any big moves. Cause he's got like an 8 or 10 month run rate, every dollar counts. So that it's a lot of fun. And that's some of the, box of hijinks, box of rocks I get to sprinkle on people I talk to.
Awesome. So, there are a couple of things that I do want to touch on, especially on validation and what validation means to a company versus what validation means to an investor, especially a VC, right? But I guess one of the two foundational pillars, apart from just the product, is also the market, right? Because when you're looking at the market opportunity from the company's perspective, you're looking at your target market. So that includes your total addressable, serviceable addressable, and then serviceable obtainable, right? The three big numbers that investors want to see. So that's the investor perspective. But then from the market opportunity for the company, it's about the current offerings. So what's existing, and then what are you bringing to the table? Because I feel like one of the biggest things that companies forget is that their largest competitor is not another company, but status quo, right? It's not about someone else coming to beat you. It's about people doing what they're already doing and staying where they are, right? And not moving to where you want it to be. So I think for the market, I think that's one thing that entrepreneurs don't often think about is, how do you beat status quo? Because, it doesn't matter if you're beating someone else if everyone believes the status quo is better. Right. So, and then I think that is what the investors want to hear, is that the status quo is inadequate, right? And then you're trying to bring it to the next level. So, how important is understanding the market, but also how do you present that to an investor to say that this is the best market to go after?
I mean, it's funny. It's like it's a great question, and it's a very convoluted, layered question with thousands of answers, right? Sure. Because fundraising is an art form. It really is. I mean, for lack of a better way of saying it, there's a lot of BS in fundraising. There's a lot of, the smarter VCs, there's check boxes and all that stuff they have to do. And the more tight their thesis is, a lot of times that benefits them tremendously, right? And they, like everything, isn't a nail and they're the hammer. So those are the most meaningful conversations. Sometimes, just jumping to the end, is when a company that, a company that might be raising their Series A has a conversation with Andreessen Horowitz, and they really have no business having that conversation, but Andreessen might take that conversation. It's a good touch, and they get just drilled on questions that prepare them for other questions with not lesser VCs, but smaller or more focused VCs. That's invaluable. Looking at the target, looking at the market, looking at exit strategy. Like, do you want to be acquired, or do you want to grow this thing to be the biggest unicorn in the world? Like, all these things kind of play into it with respect to what the product is, what is the traction. Yeah, I mean, there's targets, and it goes like when you're presenting to a venture capital firm or a prospective investor. Some of it, like if it's an angel or an angel group, what have they invested in, and what's going to resonate with them messaging wise? So it becomes super bespoke. There's certain statistical and quantitative stuff you're going to embed in the presentation. And part of it's research before you talk to somebody. It's like sales 101. Does this person have kids? Does this person hate kids? Well, if you're presenting, a doll or a Play-Doh product to somebody who hates kids, you're going to change your presentation. It's going to become a lot more mathematical and quantitative than colorful and playing on their sympathy strings. So there's not a perfect answer to that. I mean, there are certain things in the way of traction. And one of the things that annoys me, and I talked to Kyle, I think I talked to you about this as well, is a lot of times companies want to include, the overall, the total market for this thing is $700 billion. And that's great. You are not yet generating revenue, or you're not yet profitable. That thank you for telling me what the world market for selling widgets is. Let's talk about what you think you can actually attain. And that's the part when with my partnership and things that I've done in my past, when we're considering investments, it's like, that's cute. Thank you for telling me there's an $800 billion market for the product that you're inventing and how you're disrupting it. But how are you, one, what are you carving out of it as your goal, and how does that pro forma work? And two, how does that work? Like, exactly how are you carving that out? How are you achieving that? And then how are you constructing your company based on that with a reasonable, and maybe beyond a reasonable, outlay for pro forma, and maybe an optimistic one. And that also tells me, as a prospective investor or somebody in venture, all right, these guys have their women have their feet planted firmly into the ground. They're focusing on foundational revenue. As soon as they start to achieve some success, they will keep their eyes open, but they're not just going to start whacking things. And how are they constructing their team, to service those goals and service the business? And I love people I had this happen recently. We're bringing on chief counsel as their fourth employee. I'm like, okay, all right. Do you have a law product? Like, why? And they just thought that was the right thing to do, to pay somebody $130,000 and chunk off a huge bit of equity. And I'm like, I don't even know if I can continue with this conversation. Like, that is just something. But it's also a pleasure to work with people and help them. I've learned a lot over the last years, and I'm still learning every day. Like I tell my kids, every day is a school day. So I appreciate every mentee and everyone I speak with teaches me something as well, even if it's just not how to be so rigid. So back to the original question. It's an art form. Do your research on the people that you're speaking with and the outfit, the VC or angel that you're speaking with. And with respect to the product itself, there are certain central tenets that everybody knows will make a product compelling or a company compelling. And it's, team, it's what's the trajectory and what are your pro formas? What is the product? How has the product proven itself? What kind of traction is there? If it's a SaaS product or something like that, what is the ARR? Why you, why now, and why this are great questions to double check yourself going before any investor meeting, because that's typically, if you can answer those, you're going to be well ahead of the game, and you'll be able to field any questions that are coming at you. And man, there's always going to be one question in these meetings that I've found, and I've raised, tens of millions myself. A lot of it was like $25,000 at a time, so it was agonizing. But oftentimes, from the most sophisticated to the least, you get asked one or two questions in these meetings that you should know the answers to that you don't. So that sucks, and that just means you have to. It's just about repetition. So there's meetings with Andreessen or M25 or Drive out of Columbus, or these mega funds that won't invest in you, and you pretty much know that going in. Use those to really rehearse and trench, rehearsed presentations to people who will invest.
And that transitions well into the next question, which is who should you be raising from, right, as a company, right? And so what are some of your I guess, ways to judge which investors will invest in you and which investors won't, right? And you talked about going into investors like Andreessen Horowitz or Sequoia or some of these big guys, and saying, "Hey, we want some money," right? And knowing that they won't invest in you. But how do you know that they won't invest in you, right? Because I know so many companies are like, "I'm absolutely going to Andreessen Horowitz and they're going to invest in us," and I'm thinking, no, they won't. Right. But I, for some reason, I know it in my head why they won't. But I don't have, I don't always have the way of saying it to them, saying this is why they won't. So, what are some of the criteria that you kind of put in place to say these are the funds that you should raise from, and here are the funds that you shouldn't raise from?
I mean, it may be somewhat intuitive, but like the Sequoias and some of these other Andreessens and whatever, they and even Drive. They have certain amounts that they won't invest under ever. The nice thing is that a lot of these guys, if you and they're generally all pretty nice, kind-ish. They're with founders, and especially founders who kind of have their stuff together. They will take conversations, or they will direct conversations to people in their firm that will only act as. And I have this relationship with several of them, where depending on the mentees I have or whatnot, I can direct them to speak with certain levels of the cast, like certain venture firms that will invest up to a certain level, or it might be thesis-rific, like if they only invest in food tech, ed tech, insure tech, or whatever it is. So one, do they have a thesis that pretty narrowly outlines what they invest in? Two, the dollar amount, and if you're a seed stage or pre-revenue company, back of the napkin, approaching Sequoia, chances are that's not going to happen unless you've cured cancer. So there are the outlier circumstances, but they're really infrequent, where a huge VC will go off thesis or even go off their investment minimums, because they've got things to measure up to, and it's just a lot more work. Same amount of time generally goes into investing into a smaller company as opposed to a larger company, clinically diagnosed. So there are so many, small to mid-sized venture firms who will, stick to $1 million or more, but sometimes they'll dip down, or they'll immediately throw you to somebody like our little venture firm who's like, hey, we'll invest $250,000 or something like that. And they, I have relationships with these people. Everybody, if they're worth their salt, has relationships with bigger VCs and smaller ones. So even with me, we won't do back of the napkin. We follow only, and that's great. I have people out on the West Coast that will do back of the napkin. I've just met two more from Chicago who do kind of that conceptual thing. Now there's downsides of that. They want their chunk of equity that's a lot more, and they want more involvement in board seats and blah blah blah. But they will also catalyze growth if it's a worthwhile company. So this sounds terrible. Like, talk to me 3-4 years ago, and I thought networking was like a name tag, walking into a room, and I'm like, it's like car sales, buy a copier, vomit. Now there is an art and a science both to networking, especially within VC. And if you're not, if you can dial down the hubris, and if you can keep it pretty succinct, unlike me, to be able to communicate with some of these VCs at all levels, they'll befriend you, even if it's just once or twice a year. You keep in touch for when you won't need that big check later on. But on the way there, they're meeting new VCs every week. And that's really valuable for anybody on the Fireside here, because all these people, it's just reaching out in the most delicate and polite way, or better yet, networking through somebody. Most of the time, networking through somebody who's connected to somebody at the VC. Just get the intro, don't write it for them. Like, there's a guy, Mark from Hyde Park Ventures, who has something online that says, hey, don't write the message for me because it's insulting. Do me a favor, write me an email that's well put together with a couple sentences, asking me for the intro, and then putting a couple support points about why it's meaningful, and then send me that. And that's a great intro to anybody who has already said that they're willing to introduce you. It'll just happen at that point. And that's what you're trying to do, is just use everybody's time super efficiently. And anybody on the investment side who is not going to invest in you, they'll really appreciate just being able to compress the amount of time they have to put into you right then. And it'll warm them up for the next touch 6 months later.
If you're a capital intensive product, what are your potential fundraising strategies, right? So let's say if you're in biotech and that $50,000 is not going to move the needle much because you'll probably spend that in about a month in research. Right. So what are some strategies that you think, and I can probably, contribute a little bit here because I've done some of this, as alternatives to, let's say, VC, going directly to VC. I mean, a lot of the initial research, and this could be for anyone, and we had someone else talk about SBIRs. Grants are a great way to get to that, minimum viable product, or at least proving out that there is a product and there's a product market fit, right? And getting that initial traction, because in a lot of these companies, especially if they're capital intensive, won't necessarily have an easy revenue coming in from the beginning, right? And they might have to wait for a couple of years to get to that revenue. And so VCs are a great way to go if you want to raise like $5-10 million to get to that clinical trials or get to that R&D portion, which is not simple. But then there are alternatives like family offices, right? I think they're becoming a much larger part of the venture capital ecosystem. I think more and more families are realizing that just putting their money into the stock market is great, but they could probably make a bigger impact and potentially get even bigger returns if they actually put it into smaller companies and foster them and give them a little bit more traction in the beginning so that they can make that 5x, 10x return in the end. Do you have any suggestions, first, apart from, let's say, family offices or VCs, where else can companies go for funding at this time?
Family offices or VCs? No, I'm kidding. No, family offices are, I'm glad you brought that up, man, because it's interesting, in my nascency of figuring out just investment and a thesis and pulling money together for a fund. I ran into, I bring up the Bemis family and the Johnsonville Brott family and all that from the Midwest, and there's the Pritzkers and the Crowns and all that from Chicago and blah, 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 blah. And then there's certain consortiums of family offices like Envoy, ENVOI. So, this is a clandestine area, right? So family offices don't say, hey, rich people, LLC, they actually, it's like XYZ Ventures, right? So networking in that group is I fell into it on accident because of a relative I had that runs Plant Moran. And I didn't know I didn't know the honeypot I had stepped into at this point. But with respect to family offices, you're right. It's a great area, but their strategy, some don't have strategies, and those are great. And I have a back of the napkin family office that's huge. That's like, bring me anything, but we're going to take a huge chunk, and we want to be on the board, and we want to effectuate decision making. Okay, that's cool. There's certain companies that are going to love that, right? If they're that nascent. There are a lot of family offices right now who are syndicating investments through. Like maybe there's somebody who has experience who was in venture, who blah, 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 and then they migrated back and started their own family office. Talked to a guy that was part of Newchip that did this in Arizona yesterday, David. And it's pretty incredible because if you can delicately manicure your way, groom your way into a relationship or just a respectful acquaintanceship with anybody on that side of the fence, their investments are, you have to be respectful of this. They're wealth preservation, not wealth growth. They're trying to preserve wealth. They're trying to insulate against economic variables and ebbs and flows and financial crisis and the next COVID thing or whatever. So being mindful of that when presenting or having that first conversation is huge. Now, also the family offices have seen that a lot of money has been made in venture. The model isn't necessarily theirs, so they want to curate just the top tier of talent, so they don't have that 10%, success ratio that venture is so proud of. So it's really being mindful of that. So the other thing is there are other outlets. The angel networks are interesting and trying to tap into those, but it's all these very protected, walled up communities of people that are very protective of their relationships. So it's really trying to mine your way into somebody who knows somebody, and you just can't believe that you know that person who knows that person, and that person gets you in and around. Obviously, there's corporate VCs as well now. Not now, but like they're becoming more and more in vogue. And not that they don't know what they're doing, because they do, but they definitely have a different lens they look through and a different temperature of investment that could be viable, especially if people have connections into certain corporations that have accelerators or incubators, or they're just writing checks. And those aren't as legacy wealth or wealth preservation minded. So, a friend of mine started Landscape Hub out of Chicago, and her low fruit investment wise was family offices, because the money's not coming right away. She's changing a marketplace. And when you're doing something like that, it takes a lot of money and a lot of time, but there's a lot of reward because you threw the anchor and you're just pulling yourself toward it. And that's one of those unique opportunities where she was unifying a country of mom and pop purchasing prowess. And she said, I'm just going to unify that and make it a lot easier. And everybody goes, yeah, cool. When it's something that automatic, and you're literally just throwing an anchor and pulling yourself toward it, you can pull family offices in pretty easily. And she did that, along with Chicago Ventures and the former CEO of Grainger and the current CEO of LinkedIn. She's done all right.
So I do want to be mindful of your time, Chris. But any closing thoughts, Chris, before we let you go?
No, always. Beyond, you know me well enough, Mahesh, and I'm not one devoid of opinions or willingness to contribute. So please, feel free to link up with me on LinkedIn if you have any questions, or if there's anything my network can help do for you after we meet. I do like to actually meet and have a substantive conversation with anybody before I pass them along to anyone. But it'd be my pleasure, and being part of Newchip, I enjoy promoting the ecosystem.
Okay, excellent. So thank you again, Chris. And thank you for all the companies that did join our first Fireside chat. But thank you again for all of your time. And thank you for all the companies joining us. And have a great rest of the day and have a great weekend.
Thanks, Mahesh. Great to see you guys. Take care.